VR was supposed to replace gaming, like completely. We were promised full immersion, living inside games, touching worlds, dodging bullets like in a movie. And instead, most people use their headset to, well, you know what's happening. So, what happened? Did VR fail or did we just expect the wrong thing? Because the truth is a lot more interesting and a bit awkward. A few years ago, VR felt like the next big thing. Big companies were pushing it hard. Meta invested billions into VR through the MetaQuest line. Sony launched PlayStation VR and later PlayStation VR 2. Even Valve dropped the Valve Index, which is basically the luxury sports car of headsets. And for a moment, it worked. Games like Beat Saber exploded. Half-Life proved that AAA VR games could actually exist and be incredible. So here was the promise. VR is the future. Everyone will have a headset. Flat screen gaming will slowly fade away. Now, fast forward to today. VR is still here, but it feels quieter, less hype, fewer big releases, and a lot of people asking the same question. Why did it slow down? Well, VR is not just normal game plus headset. It is a completely different design problem. And this is where things start breaking. First, performance. VR needs high frame rates to avoid motion sickness, usually around 90 to 120 frames per second, depending on the headset, obviously. That means your game has to run extremely smoothly. No stutters, no frame drops. Even a small hitch can make players feel sick. So, suddenly, your beautiful indie project needs to be optimized like a racing engine. Then comes interaction. In normal games, you press a button. In VR, the player expects to grab, throw, touch, open, push. Everything becomes physical, which sounds cool until you have to code it. Simple actions become complex systems. A door is no longer press E to open. It is physics, hand tracking, collision, edge cases like what happens if the player clips their hand through it like a ghost. And then there is comfort. If you move the camera wrong, people feel sick. If you rotate too fast, people feel sick. If your game design ignores this, people stop playing. So now you are not just designing fun, you're designing comfort. And trust me, that is a different mindset. Now, you might think, okay, VR is just harder to develop. That is true, but that is not the real reason things slow down. The real problem is something else, and it has nothing to do with code. It is people, or more specifically, how people actually use VR. Before I explain that, you need to understand one key detail. Most VR players do not play for hours, they play in short sessions. And that changes everything. VR is amazing, but it is also kind of tiring. You're standing, moving, waving your arms like you're fighting invisible bees. After 30 minutes, you're done. Compare that to sitting on a couch with a controller for 3 hours. Very different energy. This is why games like Beat Saber work so well. Short sessions, clear feedback, physical but simple. But now imagine a long RPG. Inventory management, dialogue trees, skill systems, all in VR. Sounds cool in theory. In practice, most players get tired before they get invested. So developers face a weird situation. The kind of deep games people love do not always fit how people use VR. Yeah, of course, this is the main reason. Now, here is where things get a bit painful. There are not many big VR games, not because developers are lazy, but because the numbers are risky. VR user base is still much smaller than traditional gaming. According to public estimates from companies like Meta and market analysis reports, VR headsets sales are in the tens of millions. while traditional gaming platforms reach hundreds of millions or even billions of users. So, as a developer, you ask yourself, do I spend years making a VR game for a smaller audience, or make a PC game and reach way more players? Maybe that is why Half-Life is so rare. It was funded by Valve, which had a reason to take risks. Most studios cannot, so what happens? Fewer big games, less excitement, less reason for new players to buy headsets. And suddenly you have a loop. Less players leads to less games leads to less players. So, here is the big truth. VR did not fail. It just did not become everything. Instead, it became something specific. VR is not replacing gaming. It is becoming its own category. And in that space, it is actually doing pretty well. The MetaQuest 2 became one of the most popular VR headsets ever, with millions of units sold. Social VR is growing. Fitness VR is growing. Short, replayable experiences are thriving. But the dream of everyone playing massive open-world VR games every day, that was a bit optimistic. And here is the controversial part. Maybe that dream was never realistic. VR is not here to replace gaming. It is here to add something new. And honestly, that might be enough. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you still use VR, or is your headset slowly becoming an expensive dust collector? And like always, thanks for watching.